Hi, Julian. Welcome to the Bhairav Show. Hello, everyone. I have Julian Schwarzkopf with me. He's a co-founder of an IT governance, risk, and compliance startup. And yeah, so he has a lot of experience in the field of GRC, mainly compliance and risk, and around governance. So he's worked on different aspects of audit and certification, and I'm glad that I have him on the show. He's worked at KPMG, Trade Republic, and now he's working on his own startup. So, hi, Julian. It would be great if you can sort of, briefly describe your journey uh, right from KPMG all the way to your own startup.
Of course, yeah. Hi, Suhas. Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, thanks for the introduction already. Let me give you a bit of a broader overview. Yeah, I'm Julian. I started out my career in IT compliance after studying first in Dortmund and then in the UK. I joined KPMG many years ago in the area of IT compliance. I started as an IT compliance consultant there, doing IT audits in winter and compliance consulting projects in summer.
Nice.
And after a couple of years there, it was time for me to find a new challenge and a role where I can actually implement compliance and also steer it, right? I mean, I've seen many different companies from SMEs to large blue chip enterprises at KPMG, but it was always compliance consulting work rather than really steering it through. So after a couple of years doing that, I had seen a lot of things, and I wanted to actually stick with one company and really steer the compliance through and through. So back in 2020, when I was looking for a new challenge, Trade Republic presented itself as looking for their first hire in IT compliance and security, and it felt like it was a very good fit for me, right? I had a focus on finance since my bachelor, basically, and was always fascinated by the industry. And getting the opportunity to build the security and compliance function from scratch really felt like my calling, right?
Mm.
When I joined them back in 2020, I mean, it was still a small and almost unknown broker back in the days, serving like 10,000 of German customers in comparison to today, right? And yeah, that was shortly before COVID, and as we all know, during COVID, the investment boom really kicked off, especially in Europe and Germany.
Oh.
So people started investing, and Trade Republic tremendously benefited from it, right? Like 6 weeks in, we hit the million customer mark, and we expanded to Austria, to France. We onboarded crypto as a new product, and the company just grew. 2 years later, we secured the full banking license, and the company just kept growing and growing, offering its service offerings. And yeah, when I left them end of last year, we were at 10 million customers in 18 countries all over Europe. So you can imagine what kind of a interesting ride this was. I mean, the 5 years there were a super exciting time, working alongside brilliant people that they wanted to change the industry, and that's ultimately what we did.
Nice. And growing from, let's say, a 10,000 member or the customer number count to almost, let's say, 10 million, that's a huge number, right? So in terms of, let's say, governance, you'd have had to dig deep into all aspects, right, of banking as well as regulation. So taking that experience to founding a company, right, what do you think is actually broken, right? Especially when it comes to companies managing the overall GRC.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I believe that compliance has a purpose, right? It is there to reduce risk. It is the infrastructure of trust, so to speak, and it helps us as a society to translate our values and implement them on the company level, so to speak. And I believe people genuinely want to do the right thing, but often the systems around them are designed in a way that are not so much in favor of that, right? And that is exactly the issue we see today. It shows in the form of compliance being treated as a checklist often, right? Where things are done to show we have done it or we have done something. And it often becomes political. It becomes about covering your ass rather than doing what compliance was meant to do, right? Manage risks to ensure trusts. And in organizations, we often see a disconnect between the compliance and the business, right? The functions grow apart. And the one part of the function like compliance is creating policies kind of in an ivory tower. And the other function, the business, is, well, doing business as usually with compliance. It feels like kind of attached to it, right? And that results in it being done rather than as an annual exercise than a continuous ingrained process. And the result is a gap between the regulatory requirements and the business reality. And the reality today is that compliance teams are swamped with work and regulation is increasing and creating more complexity, while the teams are stuck with manual workarounds in spreadsheets and doing email ping pong. On the other hand, then we have the business teams that get flooded with compliance requests that pull them out of their work with what they feel, rightfully so, are unnecessary tasks to just document what they have done. And I think that's exactly the issue. We see compliance has become a huge documentation overhead that is differing from its actual purpose, right? The purpose of delivering trust.
Yeah. And normally, the definition itself sort of says that it's actually a continuous process, right? Right from the inception of the product or the framework all the way till certification and so on. So, but then normally what we see is that it's only a week before some auditor comes in, everyone starts moving around, right? Why do you think this happens in regulated companies?
Yeah, this so-called audit scramble is really a fascinating phenomenon, so to speak. And it's not only happening in regulated companies, right? But these companies, they feel the pressure the most because they have a lot to lose from an audit, or even more than other companies. So I think the issue is that compliance is often not integrated in the day-to-day processes. It is rather treated as something that comes on top of the established processes, something we do after, which makes it a burden then. So teams push it naturally, and when the audit rolls around, they then have to do it, and the whole organization comes to a halt to just do the work that was neglected all year round. So this is also one of the fundamental issues with compliance. I think it is often done just for the audit. With that, we miss the actual purpose, right? In my view, compliance does not have to be a burden. It can be integrated into the existing processes. And if you rethink it with AI capabilities in mind, especially today, like we do at Vigilant, it can become something that is easier to do than not to do.
Okay. And what do you think the view would look like, or the overall scene or the scenario would look like when compliance is actually a continuous process, right, within an organization?
Yeah, so we're envisioning a world where compliance is deeply integrated into the business processes, right? Where it is easier to do than not to do, like I said. So let's take a look at compliance processes today. Let's take evidence collection as an example. So how does it work? The compliance teams translate requirements into policies and publish them for the business to follow. The business then translates these into practices and controls for them to actually follow. And on a regular basis, they have to provide the compliance team with evidence to show that they are following these requirements. And while this sounds pretty straightforward, if I lay out the process now, it's very messy today. So the control owners have to collect a bunch of often screenshots, logs, and checklists to prove that they have followed the rules. And this is often a tedious manual process that costs the business teams hours of time without delivering actual value, because it's just documentation work. And this doesn't even take into account the frustration that it causes.
Mm.
Then the compliance team reviews the evidence, also often by hand, but because it's an overwhelming amount of controls, they only do spot checks. And this results in many blind spots and potential risks that remain untreated. And with what we're building at the minute, the evidence would be pulled automatically, freeing business teams from this manual grunt work.
Okay.
It is then reviewed for completeness and accuracy and documented with audit proof, anything you need, basically.
Mm.
So the compliance team can then focus on the evidence that were flagged to review by us, and they finally are no longer stuck in grunt work and repetitive tasks, but can focus on actually managing the risks or focusing on whatever strategic tasks, for example, that they are looking to do.
Okay. And you mentioned, what Vigilant does, right, in terms of where you come in, right? What do you think, let's say, brought you actually into this particular domain, given the fact that there's so much that's broken within the overall GRC tools that are available today, right? The speed at which everyone's moving, especially with AI, there's a lot more governance that's needed now. There's a lot more risk that's involved, and there's data as well, a lot more data. So, what do you think is actually sort of really broken in today's tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there are many tools out there, and you're absolutely right, right? AI is only accelerating the problem because on the one hand, it's also, I mean, it's a topic in itself, but let's not touch upon that. But it's also expediting the work or the speed at which the business operates, while the compliance team is still stuck in this manual processes, even widening the gap even more. But back to your question, what do I think is the issue with today's GRC tools? I mean, in my view, most of them are just nicer looking spreadsheets, so to say, right? They are checklists that guide you through the steps of a framework, but the actual compliance work still runs outside the system. This process or this problem is often referred to as the messy middle, in which you have compliance on one side of the business and the actual business functions on the other. And both use their tools and procedures, but they're not really aligned. So compliance has to manually track certain things and follow up with the business teams manually. And the business teams have to provide certain information manually. And this leads to, well, frustration on both sides. So the point is, despite having a number of tools available, today still 50% of compliance processes are done manually. So the tools are missing a large part of the work, in my view.
Okay. So, which would probably bring me to my next question. Like, AI is already speeding up a lot of different things, right? From being manual to sort of automating a whole bunch of things. But of course, this is compliance. We cannot let AI do everything out there, right? So,
Yeah.
where do you think, the AI can actually help automate, but have that human in the loop, right? Do you have any sort of examples around that?
Yeah, that's a good point, and let's maybe go through it step by step and unpack it,
Mhm.
right? So
Sure.
in general, I think compliance is an ideal field for AI to really deliver value, right? It is a very text-heavy space,
Mm.
and either in terms of understanding and applying regulation or in the explaining of requirements and communication between the parties, AI can really deliver great value. So one example where I believe AI is a game changer is the understanding of requirements and reviewing if they have been followed, for example. Until now, we required human intelligence to understand if separate data from different sources matched and made sense. But with AI, we can have a machine actually do that. And this is a big part of the compliance work, this reviewing, matching, and interpreting and making sense of it. But we have to be mindful of what AI can do and what it cannot do. And I feel like, I mean, you probably feel the same way with the current hype and the news coming in every day. It feels like AI is the cure of everything or for everything. But for example, you can't just dump all your compliance policies in ChatGPT and tell it, oh, make me compliant. Yeah, the model would be missing the context. So what you would need for that is a number of well-designed agents for specific tasks to get the right context and understanding. And that's already the point, right? They need to be well-designed and they need to have the context. But we still have to be mindful, especially in compliance where we handle very sensitive data. So you have to, or you have the risks of data security, but also be mindful of the dependency on AI or certain model providers, and the token costs, and obviously the accuracy, right? We're not dealing with a field here where we can let any leeway for errors. So at Vigilant, we don't let AI agents just roam freely. We use them to build repeatable processes that then run independently of the model provider. So we minimize their size, the size of the agents and their responsibility, enforcing strong guardrails, making sure that no unintended consequences are possible. And with that, we allow practitioners to, well, enjoy designing processes, seeing instant results, and to intervene if they have to.
Okay, so given the fact that it's doing a sort of a continuous monitoring, right, of not just the data that comes in, but throughout the organization, on a continuous basis, how do you think companies can sort of start collecting evidences, right, through AI and AI agents at the end of the cycle, or probably quarter, when they have to sort of present it to the auditor? Because at the end of the day, compliance is all about proving something that was done, right?
Yeah.
How do you think that an auditor would benefit from this, apart from, let's say, time, right? Time spent on analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. And ideally, obviously, the process wouldn't be done only at the end of the year before the audit, but continuously throughout the year in an automated fashion, so that you can flag any shortcomings then and there, and not only at the end of the year. But let's take a step back maybe. So the way the process looks today, or the way it looks today, is that the compliance team is managing thousands of controls and their status, right? So the business teams need to first understand all of these controls in context of their processes and systems, and then implement them. And to prove that they were implemented and executed according to the requirements, they provide the compliance team with evidence of such control, right? So this is usually done by providing screenshots, log files, other forms, but often done by hand. Now you have to imagine these are thousands of controls across their entire business, and the evidence for them is largely collected by hand and then either sent around via email or uploaded to a SharePoint. So you're beginning to feel how frustrating it can be for an engineer, for example, that was hired to write code, to collect screenshots by hand on top of his usual workflow, just to document that he has done something in a correct and compliant manner. On the other hand, you have the compliance team that is notoriously understaffed and now needs to review all of the evidence manually, different formats for different systems across all of the controls. And yeah, this can feel very frustrating and draining for them. And because there are so many controls to review and only limited resources, they are often reviewed via spot checks. And well, this presents then another problem, that it leaves many controls unchecked, and this provides risks or opens up risk for the company. So we're working towards eliminating this frustrating grunt work by automating the audit, the evidence collection and review. And this not only reduces the manual burden of frustration and additionally frees the resources up for actually value-adding tasks, and it on top reduces the risks by increasing the evidence review coverage. AI is very interesting to use here because it can go through a lot of the unstructured data and make sense of it, right? It is, in this example, it would be collecting the evidence in the first place and then comparing the evidence collected to the control requirements to determine if they're actually accurate, and in that way freeing up the compliance teams on the one hand, but also the business teams on the other hand, reducing risk, and what you said initially, provide all year-round coverage, because you don't have to wait until the end of the year to collect it. You can automatically collect it throughout the year and immediately flag if a control is not working, because we have to go back to our initial thought. The controls are in place not to have controls in place, but to reduce risks, to ensure that we can keep the trust with society and our customers.
All right, interesting. And yeah, so that brings me to my last question, right? So, what's your advice for people who want to be compliant, or other companies who want to get into uh, certifications, right? So, around maybe it's GDPR or uh, SOC 2 or something else, right? So, what would your advice be to sort of get themselves uh, onboarded with these new AI tools?
So, I mean, they would have to consider if they really need the tool, right? So the beginning is like, okay, what's my scope? What do I really need to do? And why do I actually do the work that I want to do? Is it to enhance sales? Is it to increase my trust? Is it to actually increase my security posture? And based on that, they should select the right tools or the right procedures for them to do it, right? If it's like a very small organization with very limited controls, you might be able to do it without a tool, even though a tool obviously always helps. And then, yeah, it's important to select the right tool for them. We've seen many tools, especially in the certification space, pop up, and I think there should be the right tool for everyone out there.
All right. Okay, then. Thanks a lot, Julian. Yeah, for your wonderful discussion. And yeah, that brings us to the end of the show. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.